morning, guys. So I wanted to come on here to talk about bread, our beloved bread. Who doesn't like a nice slice of bread with some avocado? So yeah, I know. I used to love it too, but actually, I got over it like very quickly, and I noticed that if I have any grains, really, I just don't feel great, and especially if I haven't had it for a while, that really just indicates a food sensitivity. So I'm very perceptive to that, and it really doesn't matter if it's gluten free or not. So I wanted to talk about bread because I've been experimenting with some raw breads, which of course are a lot better options when you can have them because they are really the whole grain in it. So I made them with buckwheat groats, which I soaked and then ground, blended, and then flax seeds. So there was nothing really processed in it per se. Bread is a different story because we're using flour to make bread, and the problem with flour is that even if you're using multigrain, it doesn't ensure you that you're gonna get the two very best components, which are the bran and the germ. Those are the inner parts of the grain that actually contain all the nutrients. What we are generally left with when we're making bread and we buy flour to make bread, and this doesn't matter if it's gluten free or not, is the endosperm. It's something, basically the outer layer, if you want, is the whiter part of the bread, if you want to call it that. There are many people always describe it in different ways, but white bread is something that can come to mind. And I said, even multigrains does not ensure that you're getting the germ and the bran. And one of the reasons is because actually that shortens the shelf life. So of course companies don't want to have their products go rancid and then off and not being able to sell it. So, but all the nutrients are into these parts. So what happens is that you're left with a lot less fiber that you would normally have if you had the whole grain. And that means that actually you are going to obviously have a reaction. So your blood glucose will spike quicker and you're not getting the nutrients that you should be getting from even things like sourdough. So having the right grains to make it with is really important. And what is recommended perhaps is that you buy the grains and mill them at home. Like you can blend them, or you can sprout and use sprouted grains like an Ezekiel bread, which has all the components, and you can make that gluten free as well, but avoiding flours because the flours are just not beneficial. So even people that are celiac, sure, you can eat the bread that you either make at home or buy it, and or who have gluten sensitivity, if they have gluten free, they can all have it, sure, but that doesn't ensure benefits of health. And I think this is something that has been a little bit lost in the message of baking your own bread at home and making it gluten free, using your own flours. Flour is still processed and high, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, it gets the germ and the bran removed, so you're left just with the endosperm. And so it's not something that is recommended, especially for people that have autoimmune diseases and that although are trying to avoid certain things like gluten or dairy and so on, they just fall into this perception that if you are eating gluten-free options, it's healthier or that you're going to have a better outcome. That's not always the case. So and in fact, actually, for healing your body, especially for things that they call autoimmune disease, whether it's adrenal fatigue or it's lupus or it's thyroid issues, the best way is to avoid the grains and actually just focus on vegetables and fruit. Very alkaline diets. If you want to have grains, sprout and soak very well things like buckwheat or quinoa. But basically, you have to be very, very diligent and strict with your diet. And I'm going to talk about that in another video that I'm going to do about how to approach cleanses and how to make sure that you are giving your body what it needs. But I wanted to talk about bread because it's a big subject. So raw bread, it's interesting. Very, I made a big loaf, and I think smaller tins are better because it took me almost 48 hours, if not more, to actually bake the thing in the dehydrator. So not great for electricity, but I would say it's a better option because now you're using the whole thing, like the whole grain and you're not using flour, much different. So if you want bread, and if you really making yourself experiment with whole grains at home, try to avoid the flours, and see how you go with that. Bye.